Good morning, Chair. It looks like we have enough members, so we can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Bradford? Absent. Pia?
Here.
Espinoza?
Here.
Green? Green? I can see you. It looks like you're on mute. Okay. I will recognize your presence. Huffaker? Absent. Hill?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
McKee?
Here.
Mendez?
Here.
Miller?
Here.
Miyasato?
Here.
Norgard?
Here.
Rurig?
Here.
Stillwell?
Here.
McLeod?
Here.
Vice Chair Goldstein?
Here.
Chair Palacios?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and get started on the agenda. First thing on our agenda is public comment. These are for public comments on any item that's not listed on the agenda but is within the board's jurisdiction. Do we have any public comments in the room or on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then we'll go on to corrections and additions. Do we have any corrections or additions?
No, Chair, we do not have any corrections or additions.
Okay, move along to the consent agenda. Do we have any comments, questions, or does anybody want to remove an item? Any board member want to remove any item from the consent agenda?
I just want to note that the minutes for April 13th show me as absent, but I was actually at that meeting, so I don't know the best process to adjust that. Thank you.
I will correct the minutes and publish with that correction. Thank you for the correction, Chair Norgard. Sorry, Member Norgard.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll go to the public. Any public comments on the consent agenda?
No public comments, Chair.
Okay, we'll bring that back to the board for a motion.
So moved, Renee.
Thank you.
Second, Pia.
Okay, motion by Mendez, second by Pia. Would you please take a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair. Pia?
Yes.
Huffaker still absent. Espinoza?
Yes.
Green? Green? Can we take the presentation down? It looks like you're having some issues with your audio, Green, but if you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I'll take that. Perfect. Thank you. Hill?
Yes.
Lewis? It looks like, Lewis, you're on mute. And your video's down.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. McKee?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Miyasato?
Yes.
Norgard?
Yes.
Rurig?
Yes.
Stillwell?
Yes.
McLeod?
Yes.
Vice Chair Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair Palacios?
Yes. Okay, thank you. That is, the consent agenda is approved. We'll
Through the,
now.
through the
Oh, go
chair,
ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We do actually need an audio vote. The thumbs up from member Green. If we could just see if that audio got resolved, if member Green is able to unmute and just say yes to that vote, that would help. I see yeah, there's still not an audio. It's not on mute, but I don't know. Is the sound all the way turned up? Sounds all the way turned up. Okay. Well, it passes without that vote, so.
I guess, are there state laws regarding Zoom protocols and whether
You know,
thumbs
this
up or
is, yeah, this is what I'm remembering, and I don't have the citation at this moment, but I thought if we could just do a quick audio, that would just resolve the question mark. But I can circle back to Heather on that and see if that vote should be recorded or not. It passes with or without that vote, so.
Yeah. Okay, it'd be good. And maybe member Green could try and log back in, and that might be a way to resolve that issue. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the regular agenda. Item number 5, the CEO's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you recall, in the past 2.5 years or so, we have negotiated and you have approved a number of power supply contracts. To be more exact, there are about 15 of them. The majority of those contracts were for solar plus storage projects that range in size anywhere between somewhere around 15, 20 megawatts to 150 megawatt. There were 2 geothermal projects, 1 wind project, and 2 storage-only projects. Okay. All right, we're back to normal. I don't usually make my reports to music, so sorry about that. In the last couple of months, we have seen a number of counterparties to those contracts that we've executed come to us saying that because of a number of issues, COVID, supply chain disruption, the Commerce Department is investigation over anti-dumping, a number of issues. They basically are coming back to us saying we cannot get the project done on time, so they want to move the commercial operation date. On the top of that, many of them have come back to us and say we need more money. We can't do it at the price that we have negotiated at. This is something very unique, never happened in the industry for as far as I can remember, that you have a contract and you sign it and you commit to it, then one of the parties comes back and say, I can't live up to the terms of the agreement, we need to renegotiate some of it. We are doing a number of things in order to address it. One, we obviously working with those developers to find out precisely whether they are asking for the changes because they have an opportunity to, or because they can take that project and sell it to somebody else and make a whole lot more money, or there's a genuine issue that they are dealing with, and without some renegotiations of the terms of the agreement, they will effectively just terminate and say we're not going to build the project. We'll end up cashing the security deposit, but that's definitely not going to come anywhere near making up for the difference between the value that we get from those contracts and any replacement power that we go out and buy instead. So we're doing a number of things, as I mentioned, working with the counterparties. We are doing an extensive analysis to see which of these contracts are worth salvaging, and we want to strategically go back and be able to, if we have to renegotiate any terms, we want to be able to be clear about what parameters and what things we will be renegotiating, and what other parameters or parts of the deal that we will not touch. We are also working with the California Public Utilities Commission, highlighting the issue and making sure that they understand the ramification of not having those deals come through, and how will that impact our ability to meet or to comply with certain regulatory mandates. In doing so, we want to make sure that we get the relief that we need to get, so we don't end up having pressure coming at us from both ways. One from the developer saying, I'm going to delay, otherwise give me more money. And from the other side, the CPUC saying, if you don't deliver certain mandatory requirement, we will penalize you heavily. And now we don't know which one to choose, whether to pay more money here or to put up with penalties from the other side. We need to get the CPUC to understand what's going on and to work with us on addressing some of these compliance requirements that are coming our way in the next couple of years. And we are also talking to our elected officials. I don't mean the folks on the policy board. I mean the elected officials on the state level and federal government level to point that issue out and see if they can work with us on getting at least the Commerce Committee the Commerce Department to ease some of the work that they are doing on the investigation for the anti-dumping, because that really is causing a number of the counterparties to basically say, we cannot get the solar panels from whatever countries we bought them from because of this investigation. Their counterparties are not delivering, they're not shipping because they're worried about having to pay a considerable amount in tariffs that they did not initially count on when they made the deals with those developers. There are too many things happening on that front. It will finally, the one thing that we are doing is, of course, looking at financially how this is going to impact our budget for next year and for the years to follow, because we're going to have to share that with you and to make some changes to adapt to the additional costs that we're going to have to pay in order to make up the difference between what we thought we're going to get from these development and what we will have now to go out on the market and get. And the market prices have gone up considerably. I would say to the tune of probably about maybe 3 times as much as the cost of some of these deals. If we have to go replace some of them, we are likely to see our costs going up quite a bit. So we're doing that study as well, because we will have to come back to you around the budget time to discuss this issue and make whatever adjustments that we need to make to the rates. I'm going to stop here on this item and go into the next one, then take questions after that. Just a quick update. As you probably know, we were working with an ad hoc committee made up of chair and vice chair of the operations board, 2 members of the policy board, including the vice chair, the chair and vice chair with the CPUC, with the Community Advisory Council, as well as myself and Rob, on just addressing some of the issues that we are having with the Community Advisory Council. We had a facilitator that worked with this ad hoc group. The facilitator put together a report. They basically ran it by the 2 folks from the policy board and the 2 people from the operations board, so they can get last-minute comments from the 4 people. And they're going to finalize the report and present it to the policy board in the June meeting. And they will have a number of recommendations, that report, and we'll see how that goes eventually when it goes to the policy board. That is, there will be plenty of other updates, and you're going to hear about it from staff. I'm going to stop here, see if I can take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, very much, Tom. I know this is a very big deal. And I know that these contracts, if we're not able to keep them and have to go out to the market and renegotiate new contracts, that it's going to have a big impact on our rates and on our budget. So it is, I want to make sure everyone understands this is a very big issue facing us. How many of these contracts, Mr. Abashi, are in danger of having to be renegotiated or not following through?
Well, I think the counts have gone now to roughly about 8.
Wow.
And one of them have already sent us a lot of termination, and we already started in courts on that one, and working with Silicon Valley Clean Energy because they got an identical contract. We gonna follow that to wherever the contract that project is already, at least the solar portion of it is already in place and producing. The battery side has not been done, and that contractor or the counterparty said since the COD hasn't happened yet, I do have a provision in the contract that would allow me to terminate, and we'll go ahead. You guys can go ahead and cash your, I forgot how much, something like $12 million of development security deposits. But the deal is over, and we are pretty much going to court now with them to basically say, no, we don't think the deal is over, and there are a lot of more damage that you have caused by backing out or sending us a termination clause, and we're going to be talking about it, either to salvage the contract and bring it back, or to ask for a whole lot more money than what we're going to be able to get from the security deposit. It's likely to be a lengthy one unless we can come up with a way to settle that dispute fairly quickly.
Thank you. Director Lewis has a question.
Yes, thank you. I do. I'm not privy to the contracts, but I would want to see, first of all, is 3CE not the only entity probably seeing this, right? This seems very convenient that these providers would be trying to get out of contracts with the way pricing is.
Yeah, we're not the only
Yeah,
one.
we're not the only.
Yeah, there are a number of CCAs that are in the same boat on this one, and it's difficult because the California Public Utilities Commission is adding requirement in the midterm in 2024 and 2025 on everybody to bring in more resources to deal with the closure of Diablo Canyon in 24 and 25. And as a result, we are seeing some of those developers basically saying, if I can terminate this contract, I end up losing $10, $20 million in deposits, but I can turn around and sell it to the other guy who's desperate to have their reliability requirement or mandates being met at twice the price and end up gaining $70, $80 million instead. This is not a really, it's very difficult. We're all going through the same thing, and my guess is we're going to end up snatching resources from one another because of the combination of reliability mandates as well as renewable portfolio standards that we have to meet over the next few years.
Right, that's what I would see as well. And this just would cause, it becomes a house of cards for community choice aggregators in the state, which would just completely fail the system and our ratepayers. So I appreciate that we'll work with our colleagues and our other community choice aggregators to fight this and educate the CPUC. And Tom, I know you're qualified to do that. The other thing you alluded to are legal financial remedies or penalties if we pursue them, are really these deposits and protracted legal action that probably wouldn't resolve this soon enough for us. We'd have to take action before, correct?
That's correct. We'll be able to get just the development deposits that we can get right away if we want to. But if we end up going in court with some of those folks, then even that money will be put aside and be part of the dealing with the dispute that we have with those folks.
That's unfortunate. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Pia had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Tom, thank you for that report. It is very, the gravitas of the numbers and the potential downside of this is significant. And so it concerns me. Is it way too premature? Do we get attorney's fees? Do we get, should we be worried about bankruptcy on some of these? Because I agree, it's the money that's in the, the development is not going to get to our costs anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry, at least on our part, about bankruptcy. I think we very well suited and situated to handle a lot of these as they come. However, it's not going to come without a price, and the price that it will be paid by our customers. Since we are not alone, since everybody's in this boat, if our price goes up, so will the price or the rates for just about all the folks in California, especially up and down the coast. And I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing for Pacific Gas and Electric or Southern California Edison. So our competitive position will still be okay. It may not be as good as it is today, but we'll see how things go. I'm still holding hope that many of these contracts will be salvaged. At this point, what we've heard from many of them is just an email, sometimes a phone call from their originator saying, this is the situation, we need to talk about renegotiation. Many of them are going to shy away from taking it all the way to court, hopefully, and we will do our best in order to salvage as many of them as possible. Again, not without a price, but again, we're not in this alone. Just about everybody is in the same tough spot, and it will take, quite frankly, an action nationally and at the state level to help ease the pain a little bit, and that's why we are focused with our discussion with the legislators and the regulatory agencies to make sure that they are aware of what's going on and the ramification of what eventually could happen, because we know that some of those developers are sincere about the difficulties that they are going through, while some are opportunistic, but we think the supermajority of them are having a tough time making a go of some of these contracts. There's a silver lining here, or probably the only good news that I can share with you is we obviously have negotiated really good contracts over the last in the last 24 months. Otherwise, we wouldn't get all of them coming back to us saying we need to up the numbers on you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, I'm not seeing any. This is just a discussion item. Are there any public comments on this item?
My apologies, Chair. Yes, we do have public comment. Jill Zemek, we're ready for you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Jill Zamek, speaking on behalf of San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace. I have spoken previously about our opposition to the concerns and the concerns about the proposed changes to the CAC bylaws. The proposed amendments place a muzzle on the CAC members, customers, and community organizations. My comment today is in regards to process. Article 7, Section 2 of the Operating Rules and Regulations outlines the process to develop and amend the CAC bylaws. It states that the bylaws of the CAC be drafted by the seated CAC members with approval required by the Operations and Policy Boards. This process was followed for a prior revision of the CAC bylaws, but it is not being followed this time. Why not? Revisions should be done in a transparent process, which follows the operating rules and regulations. Apparently, the CAC members were not even consulted about these changes. Others have posed this question in previous meetings, but the question still has not been answered. What is the justification for abandoning protocol? I would like an answer to that question right now. Thank you.
Okay, are any other public comments?
Slow Climate Coalition, we're ready for you.
Hello, my name is John Smigelski, and I'm a resident of San Luis Obispo and advocated on behalf of, excuse me, of other cities joining in the county to join 3CE. My career was spent in the utility energy sectors, and I'm a member of the California Alliance for Clean Energy, whose mission is to support and defend community choice and other energy programs in California that advance local clean energy for the environmental justice, economic justice, and social justice benefits for our communities. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Starting with an attempt to take the bylaws directly to the policy board, I and others, as the previous speaker had mentioned, have continued to raise the issue of why the current proposed revisions to the bylaws are not following the operation rules and regulations that were approved by elected representatives of the member cities and counties. The ad hoc committee approach is now taking as long as it would have if it had followed the prescribed process and allowed stakeholders a voice in this important issues. I'm fairly confident that in your current position, you follow rules and regulations. You also ensure your staff follows rules and regulations. And I suspect both of you would have an open and transparent process for matters such as bylaws changes and that concern community input. Why should this authority and management behave any differently? Management should be required to follow the operating rules and regulations that were approved by the member organizations. I too would appreciate this answer has been raised questions raised several times with no response. Again, also thank you for your service to the board.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Beverly Deschaux, we're ready for you.
Hi, this is Beverly Deschaux. I'm the president of the Electric Auto Association Central Coast, as well as a member of the California Alliance for Community Energy, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not for that organization. It occurs to me, I wasn't going to speak about this, but since it's been brought up, it occurs to me that, of course, you do have a lot of business to attend to, but the public does need to speak with you, and so perhaps you could be thinking of some way that we could speak to you that would not interfere with your business at your meetings. That's one comment. The other is, I'm having a concern in hearing what you're presenting about these contracts and the now issue of Diablo Canyon being tried to continue to stay open. So I'm wondering, I don't know, what does this have to do with that? And how will this issue across the state impact, or at least in our area, impact whether Diablo Canyon is able to shut down at its scheduled time of 24:25? Thank you. I hope that you have some brilliant ideas about how we are to survive. I know that you're doing a great job having the organization survive, but this does put a little crimp in the plan. So thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any other public comments?
That was our final public comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on then. That concludes the CEO's report. That was just a discussion item. We will now move to item number 6 on the regular agenda. This is to authorize the CEO to execute a municipal financial consultant agreement with PFM Financial Advisors, LLC, for a 2-year term, not to exceed the amount of $350,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick introduction. Our new CFO, Jaya Bajpai, has been quite busy the last couple of months, and he wants a number of us. He's doing a number of issues or dealing with a number of issues that he's going to be sharing with you right now. So I'm going to pass on the microphone to him.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chair Palacios and directors. I appreciate the opportunity and your making the time to be here. I know your time is valuable, and many of you have a number of significant pressing matters to attend to. We wanted to bring to you this contract today, not because it is integral to a number of strategic financial initiatives that we will be undertaking over the next 9 months. So while the contract itself is small, the consultant is going to be an integral part of several initiatives we're mounting. And we wanted to give you transparency into our thinking, some of these initiatives, and visibility into some major items that will be coming down the road over the next 9 months. So this is part of our effort to continue to be transparent and provide the boards with that visibility and some radar and heads up on items. Turning to this slide, you can see I'll do a short introduction, and then we'll walk through some of those initiatives, talk a little bit about the particular provider we selected, and provide a summary. Next slide, please. So as we've discussed before, 3CE finances have evolved considerably from its early days. We are projecting $400 million in revenues, or almost $1.1 million a day. For this year, we have $170 million in reserves and cash balances and an A credit rating. Most importantly, we have a strong commitment by our ownership to financial strength and stability. I want to take this opportunity to really address one of the concerns that came up earlier, was the potential impact on rates. We don't see, as Tom mentioned, bankruptcy for us as an option. We do have a strong financial position. There's no doubt that the PPAs will represent a challenge, but I would note that we have been proactively working towards that. We do in-house simulations. We look at COD dates. We have been programming in delays for some of these projects already in the budgets that we have. And in our current budget and rate setting process, we will be doing a significant number of scenario analyses to try and gauge the impact across a range of probable outcomes of what would happen on rates and to budget as it comes in. So we are in a strong fiscal in a strong fiscal situation. Certainly, there's no doubt there will be additional pressures on that. But we believe it is manageable with your support. What we've realized is that we can use this broad strength and the board's support to deploy finance more strategically. Traditionally, finance has often been seen as essentially an invoice processing and reporting function. But in maturing, evolving institutions, which is where 3C is now, we are out of pure startup mode with folding tables and chairs. There is the opportunity to use finance as an enabling function, one that can advance our twin missions of decarbonization and affordable rates. We've already taken the first step in that. We have concluded an RFP to hire a professional manager to manage a substantial portion of our reserves. As you know, we have a rising interest rate environment. Moving the reserves to a professional investment manager will allow us to gain higher yields, decreasing pressure on our operating budget. That's the 20 odd million a year we use to actually run the agency. So that's going to be a significant change for us, but it is one of those initiatives that, again, to try and use finance strategically to ease the pressure on us and advance our missions. Turning to the next slide. One of the key items that we will be exploring over this year are energy prepays. These are extremely complex transactions where 3CE effectively facilitates the prepayment of its PPAs. And by prepaying, you essentially get a discount on your notional PPA cost. Historically, that's been 7 to 12%. These are complex transactions. As you can see, there are multiple counterparties involved. Preparation takes 6 to 9 months. You have to go to the bond markets, not us directly, but the agencies that we will be working with that would be conduits for the financing. It's an arduous process, but it has been done. 3 CCAs, Marin Clean Energy, Silicon Valley, and East Bay have already done this. They did a transaction late last year, 2021, for a notional of over $2 billion over the 30-year life of the contracts. And they recognize significant savings. As I said, historically, savings have been in the 7 to 12% in these prepayment structures. So we believe that executing on these prepayments will reduce our costs, thereby, again, strengthening our finances, reducing that rate pressure, and improving affordability. We intend to, at this time, develop a prepay transaction and put all the pieces in place. When we execute will depend a great deal on the specific PPAs we choose, bond market conditions, and interest rates. But we're doing the homework right now and laying the stage for that. And we will be working extensively with advisors for the next 6 to 9 months. Turning to the next slide. You've heard today about the challenges that we are facing with PPAs. And this is inherent to PPAs. I've been in the energy business 22 years and have been fortunate enough to work in a variety of different areas. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen PPA restructurings or I've seen challenges or counterparty issues. So I would say that what we're experiencing is right now unprecedented in terms of its scale, scope, and the proximate issues. But there should be no illusion about the fact that PPAs are not ironclad agreements. And so asset ownership does have strategic advantages for 3CE. We're going to talk about this some more. But we've listed out some of the obvious ones here. They reduce markup and intermediary costs. They give us greater visibility into the supply chain. There is a trade-off between ownership and transaction risks in a PPA. But that's one of the things, that's one of the advantages that asset ownership does bring us. We do have that line of sight and control over that chain. It also gives us maximum flexibility over the asset. Again, my colleagues are later on going to speak to this in greater detail, but we believe there is a significant benefit, both from the direct ownership, but also the indirect costs. We would take down a lot of risk. And so how do we get there? To get there, really the path that represents the least rate shock and has the best risk reward for us would be to issue debt. Essentially, if we were to try and finance front-of-the-meter storage entirely out of cash, that would compress our working capital significantly, cut into our overall reserves and our rate stabilization funding. Which is not something we want in such a volatile commodity price environment. For reference, natural gas has traded over $8 recently. These are levels that were last seen more than a decade ago. So in that environment, maintaining these buffers and not drawing them down completely is prudent. By issuing 20 to 30-year debt, we can amortize the costs of some of these physical assets potentially and lower the rate impact. Right now, while interest rates are rising, we do have a strong credit rating, and our tax-exempt status does help buffer that. Issuing early allows us to get out a little bit ahead of the curve and prep us. We would have a spend-down period, so we could retain some of those numbers until that spend-down was complete. So this is something we will be exploring, issuing the debt to acquire some of these assets in furtherance of our broader corporate goals over the next 6 months. Turning to the next slide. There are a number of innovations that are coming out. Traditionally, utilities and public power are not seen as sort of the most financially innovative, but that has changed dramatically over the last decade with the energy transition. You're seeing a number of changes in Treasury Optimization, enterprise resource planning systems are being deployed, new rate structures and new rate designs are being put in place, including around things like transportation electrification, and financing and leasing initiatives are being placed where, again, you can leverage your balance sheet and put innovative financing structures in place to meet your goals. We're fortunate, we are a new organization, therefore we have room to deploy best practices and innovations. We are not hampered by large legacy processes and systems. And here, having an experienced consultant with a wide range of experience working with agencies, public power, utilities across the country can really help us by sharing some of the best practices we're seeing elsewhere. Turning to the next slide, please. So as you can see, this gives you a flavor of some of the things we're looking at over the next year. They have significant promise, but they do involve a lot of new instruments and complex structures. We are still building our capacity internally to work on these. In that context, it's important for us as we pursue these and we facilitate meeting our decarbonization and affordable rate goals that we get an experienced consultant. I view these as providing an independent view on risk reward, supporting the design and development of these transactions, providing insights, providing independent views, and also just doing general transaction support. Finally, these consultants can be helpful in getting more exposure for us in markets, and therefore for things like the prepay transaction or the debt issuance, if we choose to move forward, helping us increase investor interest. To that end, we conducted an RFP in April 2022. We interviewed 2 qualified respondents. I will say this is a niche area, particularly when you consider the wide range of initiatives we are considering. We got 2 respondents. PFM advisors represented clearly the better value and also had a broader range of services, all of which were directly applicable to the initiatives we're considering. And some of you may be familiar with PFM from some of your other roles. They are certainly well known. They've done 5 California electric prepays, and they've advised on over 900 bond transactions last year alone with a par value over $69 billion. Turning to the next slide. So to summarize, our strong financial position will enable us to essentially help weather the current storm we're in, but it'll also allow us to use the finance function as an additional method of advancing our goals. We have a number of complex initiatives, and we believe an experienced consultant is an integral part of that. Again, that's part of why we brought that back to you. We wanted to give you visibility into what we're thinking about and looking at, and also explain why this is such a critical engagement for us. We believe PFM Financial Advisors provides the broad range, exceptional experience, and value that we need. That concludes my prepared remarks. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Very informative, and I'm wondering if any board members have questions or comments. Director Miyasato.
Thank you. Just a question, because PFM is paid largely from the debt issuance, when do you expect that we would have be issuing debt? I mean, you talked about the market, and we all know interest rates are climbing. We have a good rating, et cetera. But what's the staff's estimate of when that would occur?
Yeah, a great question, Director Miyasada. Thank you. So we are kicking off right now. The first step to this is for us to do an evaluation of what our effective debt capacity is. I like to use the term bonding capacity. How much can we reasonably issue across a range of scenarios without imperiling our rating and causing significant downgrades? Because issuing the debt would clearly have an impact. So we are in discussions and hope to finalize a contract soon with S&P, the agency that rates us, for what is called a ratings evaluation service, a RES. In that, we will provide S&P with a range of scenarios and engage with them directly. Those will be for different debt levels, different structures, and they will then tell us in a confidential process, here's what would happen to your rating, here's what your finances would look like. Once we have that feedback from them, which is again confidential, we would determine what level of debt we would issue and what that structure would finally look like. At that point, we'd be ready to move, and we would look to move very quickly. I wish I could give you a more specific timeline, but we are trying. But as much is dependent on that res. I would say we are trying to move very, very quickly and get this out sooner rather than later, while rates are still low.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Director Lewis.
Yes, forgive me not showing my video. I'm driving to Sacramento to a Cal Cities event today. My question is, I understand the strategic choice of borrowing to prepay power agreements. What happens if we take on real debt and borrow at a price in these pre-purchase agreements, and then those agreements fall apart like we're seeing? What assurance do we have if we have real debt that those agreements are honored at that price?
Yeah, it's a great question, Director. So I want to make sure that I'm splitting the two pieces here. The debt issuance we are talking about to support our front-of-the-meter assets potentially would be a direct issuance by 3CE to buy and own its own assets. There is a debt issuance that is part of a prepay transaction. That is a separate transaction. That debt is actually issued by a third party. It's issued by what is called a financing conduit. In our case, it would be 3CFA, and that is the agency that would issue the debt. We would essentially novate. We would swap out. We would have a novation procedure in which the PPAs are actually novated out, and we would have a commodity counterparty supplier. It becomes a complex transaction, but what I can tell you is that in the history of prepays, the default we are aware of was Lehman Brothers, Main Street back in 2008, and at that point in time, there was no recourse to us, to what would be us, and Main Street was actually paid back very significantly. In this particular case, if the PPA developer defaults, essentially it would be no different than if they defaulted with us right now. So we would still be in the same kind of situation where we would have to work with it, but we would not be necessarily on the hook for the debt issuance that comes through. Does that answer your question? And I'm happy to explain this offline.
Yes, no, that does. That's very helpful. And I certainly appreciate the strategic thinking of the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll go to the public.
Chair, we don't have any hands raised at this time.
Okay, bring it back to the board for a motion on item number 6.
So moved for Miyasato.
Thank you.
Second, Lewis.
Okay, motion Miyasato, second by Lewis. Please call a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Bradford.
Yes.
Pia.
Yes.
Espinoza.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
McKee.
Yes.
Mendez.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Miyasato.
Yes.
Norgard.
Yes.
Rearick.
Yes.
Stillwell.
Yes.
McLeod.
Yes.
Vice Chair Goldstein.
Aye.
Chair Palacios.
Yes, and the item is approved. Going on to item number 7. This is to support policy board approval of CCE turnkey ownership model for front of the meter energy storage assets.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob Shaw is going to be presenting this item.
Thank you, Tom. Chair Palacios. I will try to quickly walk through some of the benefits and assessments, but I think the overarching components you've heard a little bit from Jaya and a little bit from Tom already as part of their presentations. We are thinking, given what we're seeing in the market, the relatively small size of this initial batch of front-of-the-meter energy storage facilities, and what we've seen in the RFO, that it's time for us to consider potentially owning these assets, and we are proposing that we own these initial batch of assets. Just a little refresher on front-of-the-meter energy storage. This is a first of its kind approach to deploy between 1 to 5 megawatt in size batteries throughout our service territory, really delivering on that grid reliability component of having generation located where land is cheap and sun and wind is plentiful, and then delivering that to storage that's much closer to the load centers. This has gained a lot of attention from the California Energy Commission and from the industry itself as being part of that next step in our move to a more renewable grid. Owning these assets would be a deviation from our current PPA structure or energy storage contract structure, where it's a fixed price over a fixed term, and you know throughout that project what your estimated revenue stream is from that asset and how you're going to utilize that. The taking on the project development and ownership brings with it some additional risk, but also some additional benefits. Effectively, we come down to the need for upfront capital, and Jaya talked about the need for upfront capital and how we can manage that initial risk through bonding, through depreciating the asset over time to reduce rate impacts. You have operational needs, operational and maintenance needs, operational site control needs. Those are things that we would competitively bid for outside of the project delivery process. And then you have just expertise that's required from the electric procurement contractor, the EPC, to that operational maintenance. And again, this is areas where we would augment staff needs where appropriate and contract for those services. In bringing the project online, and this gets to part of Tom's presentation earlier and also what Jaya was talking about a moment ago, there are additional risks as the owner that you're taking on. You're designing and procuring the asset. You've got interconnection and permitting concerns. Construction and commissioning is now in your responsibility area as the owner. You have that capital concern. You have your ongoing maintenance concerns. You're going to plan for what that end-of-life capital investment looks like. Are you going to prolong the life of this asset beyond its initial term? What's the level of round-trip efficiency that you want to maintain over time? All of those components are components that typically we do not take on, but as we're seeing in the PPA space currently, that does not mean you're insulated from the risk of those components. By taking on those components, we have more direct access, line of sight, and control over those various pieces and manage them much like you would see most capital projects that you would deliver in your cities. The revenues and returns, and John, if you can bring up just the summary slide, we can look at this summary slide that I prepared trying to capture just what the risk and benefits are. Thank you, John. So from a cost perspective and looking at what we saw in our request for offers, there would be cost savings of anywhere between 3 and 13% to deliver these assets as turnkey owned assets as opposed to takeoff agreements. That is going to be influenced dramatically by the cost of operations and maintenance. Your long-term capital planning for how to maintain those assets, the level of maintenance that you want to do. We're seeing that cost, I think, somewhere between 1 and 2%, and then on a notional value, maybe 10 to 20% of that notional value. But that will be competitively bid, and then we'll work with engineers to develop what exactly that operation and maintenance schedule and level of investment looks like to ensure that we're maintaining the level of returns that we're anticipating. And again, I talked about, and Jaya actually talked about, the upfront capital investment and managing that through a bond issuance and depreciating the asset over time. We have, I think, just in the project delivery phase, there's really two different interpretations. We talked about the control of the planning and assets, and that could be looked at on both sides. The control of controlling those, or the benefit of controlling those, having direct insight, being able to work with engineers to specify exactly the materials, parts, suppliers that you want to work with to deliver a battery that's going to meet your needs. But you take the risk of owning those benefits. One of the positives here is that any changes, any delays, any change in supplier or materials, those would be negotiated between 3CE and the EPC contractor directly, not negotiated in a space where you're negotiating with a developer, potentially their tax equity investor, or their tax investor and their equity investors. So it would be direct, and you would have under your contract a mechanism in which to address those. You also have some benefit in terms of our relationship, you as providing cost-free site access or site for these front-of-the-meter batteries to sit, and the relationship that you have for that duration and term of the battery, putting us in a project delivery standpoint to not have an intermediary of the EPC contractor and the site host. It also gives us the ability to manage the community microgrid development tariff and program in a way that reduces potential conflicts of interest that might be between the developer, who would have the asset, and when islanding assets under those CMEP tariff and programs would be potentially beneficial for critical load versus when it would be beneficial from a revenue generating standpoint from the developer. And then the last component there is just, again, the real evaluation that needs to be done as we're looking at owning these front of the meter battery assets is what is that battery degradation? What's the schedule of investment that we're going to plan for? What's the decommissioning plan and any capital investment to renew those as we move forward? That's the conclusion of my presentation. John, if you can bring down the slide, I'm happy to take any questions at this time. What we're looking for here is the board's support to take ownership proposal to the policy board, and really the action that would be before the policy board in the future would be for that bond issuance to be able to finance the upfront capital costs. Thank you.
Okay, on the agenda, it's listed as a discussion item, but I imagine we'll just take a vote to show our general support. Before we get that, Director Miyasato has a question.
Thank you. Just really quickly, so I really appreciate 3CE putting this forward as one of the selected sites for potential front of the meter battery storage. One of the issues we were talking about among the city, my county, was this issue of private ownership and when they may make decisions to optimize, revenue versus what's needed at the time. So I really do appreciate it and I support this. So my question, Rob, is there any, because these programs rely obviously on PG&E and when Edison puts theirs together on the microgrid tariff program, is there any more risk of us owning or operating vis-a-vis what decisions may be made by PG&E on their microgrid programs than have, I guess my question is two-part. One, is there any risk to us given what on PG&E or SE's future decisions on the microgrid program? And then two, is there any greater risk to us if we own or operate? Thanks.
No, thank you for that question. I think it's a good question. Especially in Southern California Edison territory, where there is not yet a community microgrid program established, there is, of course, risk in how they might develop that, how that looks, what kind of investment would be required for the engineering components. That risk exists regardless of the ownership model, and I don't see that it changes based on our ownership versus a developer ownership. If anything, I think it would mitigate it to a degree. Sorry, I got to look at you over here. It would mitigate it to a degree only because we are currently and have had very fruitful conversations with PG&E's microgrid enablement team. They are still developing that, and I think our direct input, not having a developer that would have potentially a financial stake in how that program would work in the middle, helps us manage, I think, the delivery and how we would expect that program to operate moving forward. And it's slightly related to your question, which is control over the interconnection. So with these batteries, I think being able to bring the batteries online through a fast-tracked interconnection process where deliverability from the CAISO is not finalized, but bringing it on, being able to operate it as an energy-only resource, reducing our RA obligation on the front-end schedule side of things so that our overall CEC stated obligation is reduced, and then pursuing full interconnection at a later date just gives us greater flexibility. And again, having the developer outside of those conversations and having the EPC turn the asset over to us, and then it's our management of the interconnection process moving forward, could help streamline that and help us give us greater flexibility in how we want to operate the asset sooner without interconnection or moving it to a full interconnection.
And if I could, one other question, the savings that are estimated to be generated from ownership and development by 3C or working with the developer, are those going to go back into this particular program for whatever staff needs or et cetera for this front of the meter program, or have you guys thought about that?
Yeah, the front of the meter energy storage effort is not a program. So any savings that we generate by moving from a turnkey model, or I'm sorry, an offtake model to a turnkey model just reduces the overall cost of energy for customers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, we'll ask for public comment at this point.
Just one moment, Chair. Beverly Deschaux, we're ready for you.
Hi again, Beverly Day Show. Rob, I'm a bit confused about the ownership of the storage. I thought that if it's in front of the meter, PG&E owns it. So how is it that 3CE would be owning it? And how would the energy that is stored in it be able to go back into the grid, or do we not have those permissions yet to do that? Or where would the energy go? I thought you had said it would be near, it would go near where it's stored. But could you say a bit more about that?
Okay, any other public comment? We'll get to the answer to that after public comment. Any other public comment?
My apologies, Chair. Yes, Slow Climate Coalition, we're ready for you.
Thank you. This is John Spielski. I previously introduced myself. Well, it's really exciting for 3C to actually be doing projects that are local. What concerns about this project, whether there's ownership or not ownership, is that it's not providing the resiliency value to the host site that behind the meter or the customer side of the meters would provide. Other CCAs are really active pursuing this with a certain models that actually provide some benefits to the CCA as well as the customer. So I really would be great if you could compare at some point in time two different programs, one where you actually provide benefits to the host site as opposed to just a hedge on energy costs. And one of the problems with batteries as they're situated, they consume carbon. Every time the battery gets charged, every time the battery gets discharged, there's a carbon impact, and it's not really helping us reduce the carbon impact of the installation. So again, encourage that doing something local, but could they do something local that actually benefits the host site for these batteries? And others are doing it. There's probably 4 or 5 programs out there by other CCAs that follow that model. And while you're perhaps unique in this approach, others are doing something that benefits their customers. So thank you again.
Okay, any other public comment?
Brett Garrett, we're ready for you.
Hi, yeah, this is Brett Garrett in Goleta, and actually John just said a lot of the same things that I wanted to say. One thing that also occurs to me is that 3CE could be doing more to facilitate battery storage behind the meter that customers can own and benefit from, that can meet their resilience needs. And it means that the customers would be putting up probably most of the funds for the batteries, dramatically reducing the risk that 3CE is taking on by purchasing batteries. So, I mean, I think it's very good that 3CE is doing this, the current plan, but I would also love to see more effort to facilitate customers having their own batteries and microgrids for their own resilience. Thank you.
Chair, that was our final public comment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shaw, I don't know if you want to try and give brief answers to any of those comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to just offer 2 clarifications. Front of the meter does not equal IOU ownership. It just is where it's kind of a division between wholesale asset and a retail asset or customer-sided asset. And then the front of the meter program does provide value to customers directly. It is able to discharge to the grid. So while it can operate and generate revenue during non-grid stress times. It is designed, it is our effort to have these resources be able to deliver value to the host sites.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and take a motion. This is to support the policy board approval of the turnkey ownership model.
So moved, Renee.
Thank you.
Second, Miyasato.
Okay, motion by Mendez, second by Miyasato. Please roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Bradford? Bradford, you're on mute. Okay, I'll come back. Pia?
Yes.
Espinoza?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
McKee? McKee, you're on mute. Okay, I'll come
Yes.
back. Thank you. Mendez?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Miyasato?
Yes.
Norgard?
Yes.
Rerig?
Yes.
Stillwell?
Yes.
McLeod? Oh, sorry, McLeod has left the meeting. Vice Chair Goldstein?
Yes.
Chair Palacios?
Yes.
Going.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Did you want me to go back to the two that I had missed?
Yes, go back.
Okay. Bradford? One more time? Okay. And I will mark her as absent. Thank you so much, Chair.
Okay, motion is approved. We have one more item on the agenda. This is item number 8. This is to adopt resolution number OB 22-01, delegating to the CEO certain contract administration authority to resolve disputes and potential delays on existing power purchase agreements and to enter specialized legal services agreement for support.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask Rob to introduce this item as well.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chair Palacios. John, if you can bring up the presentation. I will try to quickly get through and not repeat a lot of the discussion from earlier because it does, I think, relate very directly to what Tom was sharing. This slide doesn't tell you anything that you don't know if you haven't been following, if you've been following the news. And I think to Director Lewis's question earlier, it's not just CCAs that are seeing these impacts, it's everybody. And as you can see there, Southern California Edison has been very public about some delay impacts to some of their projects as well. So in the market, we have a number of things happening. We have the midterm reliability procurement mandate that has put 43 load-serving entities into the market for the same near-term, near-delivery resources, which is driving up competition for those resources. You have, as Jaya mentioned, historic market shifts from near record lows and record lows in some places to near record highs in energy costs. We have supply chain issues that are everything from manufacturing shutting down in China to entire cities shutting down in China that's preventing the shipping of materials. You remember the Suez Canal issue from 2020. There are still lasting impacts from some of those. Tom referenced earlier a Commerce Department investigation into solar panel material and tariff avoidance efforts, dumping those tariffs in Southeast Asian countries or dumping those materials in Southeast Asian countries to be manufactured and shipped. So the Commerce Department's investigation and the potential retroactive application of tariffs is really impacting the solar panel delivery supply chain. You have significant increases in raw materials. Lithium is up 400% since the beginning of the year. And then you also have this market reshuffling that Tom mentioned earlier regarding just how the midterm reliability requirement and then the simultaneous RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, compliance period 4, which is from 2021 to 2024, that compliance period and those resources, everyone competing for the same, because there are resources like ours that are under contract to come in and provide some value during that RPS compliance period, it's causing a reshuffling of projects, all of those driving up the cost for these renewable projects. We're also seeing developers really push the definition of force majeure. Things that would typically be a known developer risk that developers carry and price as part of their project. We're seeing developers offer those permitting, interconnection, access issues as potential force majeure claims. The developers are looking at all of these, and they're citing them or a combination of them, looking for price increases that Tom mentioned earlier, looking for delays on projects. And as Tom mentioned, some of the projects really have been impacted. Other ones are seeing that we negotiated very successfully early on. As a CCA, we were very early in our commitment to new resources and not just buying compliance products. That commitment has put us in a position where we have more contracts than most CCAs that are coming online in these early years, and most of our contracts are well below the current market. So it's creating a competition and some volatility that's resulting in developers coming back looking for some assistance and looking to reopen certain terms within their PPAs. As off-takers, we don't hold development risk. I think I referenced this earlier. We don't look at supply chain or supply plans. We don't look at cost-loaded schedules. If there's a change in the supply plan, it's not submitted to us for approval. We don't pick suppliers or developers or manufacturers. We have no insight to that. Nevertheless, developers, I think, are shifting their development responsibilities and looking for load-serving entities to share in some of the pain. Our view has been resoundingly that we're not going to take on the developer risk and pass that through to our customers. We have been pretty firm that we're not renegotiating product, price, quantity, or term. But there is some room to work with developers to help get these projects delivered. At the end of the day, security claims, damages, those aren't what we're looking to deliver. We're looking to deliver projects and value to customers. And in order to do that, we want to avoid certain impacts. And those impacts are both short and long term. There are the immediate impacts of needing to replace those projects and being exposed to higher market cost, at least until we're able to find a replacement project. There's also our commitment to meeting and accelerating the state climate goals. So under the current structure from the CPUC, we may need to go and say what other compliance products are available, if not a new resource project. And in evaluating those new compliance products, we may find ourselves, one, moving away from our own procurement standards, looking at PCC 2 or 3 compliance recs for RPS periods. We may look at not delivering, still meeting our 2030 goals, but not delivering our 2025 goal of 60% of clean and renewable energy. Those adjustments will be made on a case-by-case basis in a larger discussion as we move forward. But we also need to take action to, as Tom said, salvage, but bring these projects online. And that's really what the resolution that's before you is designed to do. The window to negotiate some of these changes is relatively narrow, depending on the condition of PPAs. If a project is started construction and nearing its commercial operation date, we need to move very, very quickly. If we have a little bit of room, there's more time for those negotiations. But what we're looking for is additional delegated authority to be able to negotiate and amend the existing PPAs, really around pre-commercial operation date components. It is moving the construction start or commercial operation start dates that may also include changing the portion of a project that comes online, separating the solar and the battery. It may include changing the interconnection status that we start a project with and then moving to a full interconnection later. Also looking for the authority to be able to change and adjust how we would accrue and assess and then invoice for daily delay damages. The daily delay damages generally are related to those security deposits, and there's a cap, but being able to manage how they accrue, keep the developers invested in delivering the project on time, incentivizing them to do so, but addressing potential cash flow problems that developers might be experiencing. And then another component is adjusting pre-operation price deliveries. So we have projects, the recent one that Tom was referencing earlier, the solar portion of the project has been online and delivering power. We have a contract right to that power at a certain percentage of the overall contract value. Adjusting that price might be another area where we can adjust and respond to the developer's need for cash flow concerns, but also ensure that we're getting the value of the RECs and the power that's being delivered to the CAISO. And as part of the resolution, we're requiring the board continue to update, the CEO continue to update the boards, as well as the Energy Risk Management Committee, as well as the Executive Committee. My apologies to Jamie, who will have to hear it over and over again. And then it is limited just through the end of this year. There's no magic to the December 21 date that is in there. Presumably, it just forces us to come in November with some clear direction regarding whether or not we would look to renew the resolution or whether or not we're at a point where we can let the resolution expire. The next steps, and again, Tom mentioned this, we are currently evaluating all of our PPAs. We're evaluating where can we make changes, where will those changes add value to 3CE? Can we restructure a project separating the battery from solar? Can we restructure and resize a portion of the project? Can we add value to our for our customers by restructuring a PPA? Those discussions we're going to evaluate. We're willing to bring those back to the boards as necessary as we move forward. We're also going to be evaluating replacement projects as well as replacement compliance products, avoiding potential commission penalties while also setting ourselves up so that under the statute for commission penalty waivers, we've met the requirements of the statute, which one requirement is that you take all efforts to meet the requirement, the compliance requirement. We'll continue to have conversations with the CPUC. We've started that process already. Those conversations have really been around how can the commission help address what is a market issue. The compliance structure that I just talked about in statute, that compliance structure is intended for individual load-serving entities that don't perform or individual contracts that don't meet the standards. This isn't that. This is a market issue. As Jaya had mentioned, it is unprecedented in terms of its scope and scale and the number of parties that are being impacted by the supply chain COVID issues. So we continue to work with the Commission about how can they change or modify compliance periods, how can they help us address some of these force majeure issues that are being raised, how can they help reduce some barriers for developers. And then finally, a conversation needs to move directly, again, as Tom referenced, to the legislature, our legislative delegation, and the governor. Again, this is a market issue that goes well beyond 3CE. It's impacting all load-serving entities in California. I'm just going to go back so that you all can see it. The resolution, again, trying to get authority for the CEO to be able to negotiate around start date of construction and COD manage liquidated damages, being able to negotiate around any commercial operation terms and delivery of energy, giving us flexibility for those developers that really are being impacted. We can give them a pathway to get their project to the finish line. Anything that would change product, price, term, or quantities, those provisions would not be covered by this resolution. Those would have to come back to the boards. And that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have questions from the board? Okay, I don't see any questions from the board. We'll go ahead and go to the public.
No public comment, Chair.
Okay, we'll come back to the board for a motion.
I move the item. Pia.
Thank you. Motion by Pia.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Second by Norgard. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Bradford.
Yes.
Pia.
Yes.
Espinoza. Oh,
Yes.
Thank you. Green.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes, and good luck.
Lewis.
Yes, go get them.
McKee.
Yes.
Mendez.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Miyasato.
Yes.
Norgard.
Yes.
Stillwell.
Yes.
Vice Chair Goldstein.
Yes.
Chair Palacios.
Yes, motion is approved with lots of good luck as well. Best wishes. Okay, that brings us to board member reports and comments for information only. Are there any board member comments or information? I don't see any. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you everyone for your participation. Greatly appreciated. Have a great day. Goodbye. Bye.